This installment in our series on using Ubiquity looks at magic. This installment is long overdue and was quite difficult to edit together, mainly because of how much I find myself wanting to say about all the cool things you can do with magic and Ubiquity and how easy and fast it is. This video that you're watching now should represent trimming all of the fat away and leaving just an overview behind so that you can get a good sense of how magic works in the game, and that's it. However, let's start with an overview of where magic can be found in Ubiquity. In Hollow Earth Expedition, Desolation, All for One Regime Diabolique, and Leagues of Adventure, one can find rules for magic somewhere. In some of the games, Desolation and All for One spring to mind most notably. Magic is a significant part of the setting. In other games, it can be purely optional, or it has become the focus of expanded setting material. What do I mean by that? Well, currently, Leagues of Adventure is receiving an update. A new, let's say, setting supplement has been produced called Leagues of Gothic Horror. Leagues of Gothic Horror looks at being the ultimate source book for this kind of atmosphere, this kind of environment where things like magic, ghosts, the supernatural, all might be just around the next corner. That's a 160-page supplement that looks at things that go bump in the night, and magic is a big part of that. In Hollow Earth Expedition, 2 expansions to round out the world were released. We've looked at them earlier. These are Secrets of the Surface World and Mysteries of the Hollow Earth. And it's in these books that magic is introduced to Hollow Earth Expedition. We're going to start there and use Hex as the basis of most of our examples. But I'm going to apply an artificial division to magic in Ubiquity to make this video easier to navigate. I'm going to divide magic in Ubiquity into ritual magic and freeform magic as 2 major approaches to running magic in the system. And there's also alchemy. And alchemy is expressed in 2 different ways. I'm not going to focus very much on alchemy as, 3 different types of examples will make this video much longer than it needs to be, but I will talk about it a little bit so you get a sense of it. So, just to recap, let's take a look at where exactly the magic rules can be found. Okay, now using my artificial distinctions, let's begin our discussion of magic with what is true, for the most part, through all the different incarnations of magic. Magic in Ubiquity, there's the pervasive idea that magic is a force. It's a source of energy. It's all around us. It's limitless, and that it can be channeled through learned skill to create effects. If this channeling process follows the rules of your tradition, then for the caster, it's quite safe. But in times of great need, some of those safeguards, some of those ritual preparations, may be done a little differently. So you channel it not in a controlled force into your effect, but allow it to rush through you like a torrent, increasing the power that you draw upon and taking risks with your health. It can cause damage to the caster, even under the point of death. Magic is handled in Ubiquity essentially as a specialized skill. This means that you're using a skill rating, right, built from a base attribute plus the levels you have taken in that magic skill, and rolling versus a difficulty in an extended test. It's an extended roll in Ubiquity with a specialized skill. There's one other factor. In order to be able to channel this magical energy, a character must have the magical aptitude talent. That talent is what's called a unique talent, and it means if you have it, you can use it. If you don't have it, you can't. And there are no upgrades into different levels like you'd find with the accuracy talent, for example. It's not something you spend style points on to achieve different levels or greater power. So, with the magical aptitude talent, a character has access to using magical knowledge with effect within the game world. For the most part, the magical aptitude talent can be taken at any time in the character's life, although in some campaigns or in some games, you may find that it's restricted to character creation. Magic is approached by beginning with the effect. What does the caster wish to do? This will lead to the assessment of a difficulty. Once the difficulty is known, the environmental conditions leading to modifiers either for or against the success of that intent, the skill rating is rolled in an extended test following the normal rules for extended rolls in Ubiquity, and then the final outcome is narrated. At the beginning, this may seem daunting. How do I know that I'm assessing the difficulty correctly? But a lot of support has been given in each of the games where magic appears in helping you get your head around what factors matter in the creation of the difficulty. To get over the perceived barrier of the difficulty of creating difficulties, I would recommend running a few sample spellcasting scenes. Try different types, different levels of effect, different types of ritual, and determine what the difficulty is. Now, in Hollow Earth Expedition and Leagues of Adventure, you'll find that difficulty is really quite easy to set, as it defaults to a 5, or whatever is listed in the ritual description. So it really doesn't get much easier than that. However, there are situational modifiers which you may wish to apply, such as the caster may be from a tradition which requires some kind of verbal component. They must be able to chant or speak or sing or what have you. If they are somehow constrained from being able to follow all the elements of their tradition which go into spellcasting, then they'll receive penalties. If they're just slightly limited, like they must whisper instead of speak, then this would be a small penalty. If they can't speak at all, then this would be a major penalty. And there are other things that go along with that. But assigning modifiers is a part of being a Ubiquity GM. It's something that you pick up pretty quickly. And with Magic, it follows all the same rules that you're already used to. And that covers the bare bones of Magic in Ubiquity. It's a specialized skill. You'll be rolling your rating versus a difficulty number with modifiers. So, let's now look at ritual magic. Ritual magic is essentially what we find in Hollow Earth Expedition and Leagues of Adventure. This is the idea that the magic-using character has access to a tradition of magical knowledge, and they will follow that tradition in order to bring these magical effects into their world. It is possible for them to learn or use rituals from other traditions, but to do so is more difficult. There are very few things which are limited by skill level in Ubiquity. Magic is one of them. Each time you increase your level in your magic using skill, you'll gain access to a new ritual. That ritual will have its rank limited by your current levels in magic use. So a character with level 1 in their spellcasting skill will only have access to level 1 rituals and will gain 1 with that first purchase. It is possible to gain more through taking advanced specializations. Once they move to level 2, they now have access to rank 2. And they could take another level 1 ritual, or they could take a level 2 ritual, and on it goes. And through the events of the game, they become more and more powerful. So, unless otherwise stated, the extended role for spellcasting will require them to generate 5 successes before the spell will begin. Rituals are described according to their traditions, and let's quickly now list what those traditions are. In Hollow Earth Expedition, we gain access to what we would call good magic in Theurgy, and we gain access to what we would see as evil magic in Necromancy. In Mysteries of the Hollow Earth, this is then expanded into shamanism, and we see the rules for alchemy there as well. Each of those traditions has their own list of rituals ranked from 1 to 5. Some of those have no listed difficulty, meaning you need 5 successes. Some of them do have a listed difficulty, and some of them even go so far as to supply guidelines for modifiers, such as, let's say that there's a character with the magical aptitude talent that we have determined has been taught in the necromantic tradition. Remember, there's Theurgy, necromancy, and shamanism represented in Hollow Earth Expedition. We'll keep alchemy separate for now. This character, schooled in necromancy, may begin play with the Contact Dead ritual. Now, this ritual has its difficulty determined in the ritual write-up. Unless otherwise stated, the difficulty for the extended role will be 5, but it may simply be written in the ritual description, as well as suggestions for modifiers. Now, that Contact Dead ritual is an example of this. The difficulty is the willpower of the departed spirit you are seeking to contact, and the modifiers are contributed to by the idea that how long it has been since that person perished matters. The longer they've been dead, the harder it is to contact them. So in a very small ritual description, you get all the information that you need to approach adjudicating the casting of that ritual. As we've mentioned a few times, casting a ritual is an extended role. It may take some time in order to achieve all the successes which end up being required for successfully doing so. Time is a little elastic. It may be occurring in combat. It may be occurring outside of combat. And as it is a skill roll, it's subject to all of the rules which normally apply. The expenditure of style points, for example. The effect of modifiers, same way. Where things can change is that in order to keep up the mystery and the tension of magic, this is not an area where taking the average is encouraged. And, as we mentioned earlier, we have the capacity to channel more magical energy. That will increase your die pool, but it will cost wound levels. Magical energy is not something with which to trifle. And that's really it. That sums up ritual magic as briefly as I can. Trust me, there's a lot more I want to say. Let's move on to Freeform Magic. Freeform Magic appeared in Desolation, and there is a lot in this book about magic. It may be that the magic using classes, I mean social classes, from the before are responsible for the desperate straits of the characters now in this post-apocalyptic nightmare. Magic has turned against the people of the world, and everything is coming apart. Using magic in Desolation puts you at risk of suffering this painful, debilitating backlash called burn. As they open themselves to channel magical energy in order to create their effects, it surges through them in wild and uncontrollable ways, burning them from the inside out. Over time, they may become inured to this. They may become better able to channel that magical energy. But at least now, in these post-apocalyptic days, magic is friend to no one. There are different traditions represented, or different arts represented within the game. These define what type of spells your caster has access to. Characters are limited, pretty much across the board, to one area of magic. It might be something like animism, the ability to communicate with spiritual forces, aiding in easing or causing mental suffering, curses, blessings, fate and fortune to some extent. It might be the ability to bond with particular elements and bring forth effects related to those elements, such as fire or air, water, earth. It may be necromantic, what's called in this game necromantic, which is the ability to heal or harm, or to control the body in some way, and so on. Magic is very rich in this game. We're not going to go into all those details. That's why you buy the game. What we're going to look at is how magic works. Freeform magic in Desolation begins with the effect. What is the caster trying to do? And to help in assigning the difficulty, the designers have broken down potential effects into 9 different areas. Those 9 areas each come with a very small chart which indicates the types of effect within that area which get a certain difficulty. And they go through from a difficulty of 1 all the way up to a difficulty of 6. So with a few practice spells, where you go through step by step, saying it's this type of effect, they're doing this exact thing with that type of effect, so the difficulty is 3 for that. And then you move on to the next step. We'll get to the next step next. So it sounds complicated to say it. To actually do it isn't. For example, to alter or enchant a character, what you're talking about is maybe increasing their strength. The magic surges through them and makes them more physically powerful. To what degree is this happening? Right. That's what you find in the chart. And it's pretty intuitive. Once you've done it a few times, you'll just be assigning difficulties from memory. It's really not that hard. So, once that base difficulty of the actual effect is determined, you move on to modifiers. And modifiers are things like, how far away is the recipient of the spell? Am I casting it on myself, or am I casting it on some guy on a hill that I can barely see? The intended duration. Is this something like healing, where the magic does its effect and then the magic is over? Or is this an ongoing process of being affected by magic? The duration matters. Is it area of effect, or is there a specific number of people that need to be affected? All of these things affect the difficulty. And again, this is a very simple process that becomes intuitive with a few uses. So, what else is there to magic? Is that really all there is? No, as you go through the traditions, each tradition very kindly has a list of sample spell effects with their difficulty already done for you. So this serves two purposes. It helps the player get a sense of what characters of that tradition actually get up to with magic, and it gives them a sense of what they, with their particular rating in that ability, might conceivably be able to do within a certain period of time. Now, the last part of magic is burn. When you finally do roll the dice versus the difficulty, everything that is not a success generates burn. This brings in a whole new part of play. Players deciding how many of their possible die pool, how many dice in their potential die pool, they're willing to commit to a particular spell effect, because everything that is not a success is causing them harm. Now, harm can be mitigated in a number of ways. There are talents that can make them more resistant to it, and style points may be spent to hold off the pain. But really, if you go all out on every spellcasting roll, you will cast spells faster, but you may also knock yourself unconscious or burn yourself to death. Now, there's much, much more I want to say about Magic and Desolation. It really is cool. I've had so much fun. I summoned a dragon! Actually, I created a dragon out of the magical energy of the universe around me. Magic in Desolation is really cool. Try it out. Let's move on to All for One. All for One, Regime Diabolique was my first Ubiquity game. There was something about it, something the way it was described, the awesome cover, made me go in on it. I got it in PDF originally, and I had it for about an hour before I ordered the hardcover. And yeah, I love this game a lot. And the magic system is just one of the things about the game that I like. It's freeform, like Desolation, but it operates slightly differently. Unlike Desolation, where you begin with the effect and build toward difficulty that way. In All for One, we begin with the parameters of the effect. So the range, the duration, the area of effect, the number of people that it might affect, before getting into what the effect actually is. We spend most of our time actually thinking about what we are narrating. So we begin with the minor details, and then as those fall into place, we're shaping the narration of the spell in our mind. The game approaches it calling things complications, and the complication is raising the difficulty. So every aspect of the spell that you are focusing on will raise the difficulty. Now, one thing I didn't mention when we were talking about Desolation a minute ago is that even if you fail, you may succeed. So if you needed 5 successes to create an effect in Desolation, if you got 4, you did not get exactly the effect you wanted. If you got 8, you got the effect you wanted, and you could enhance it in some way. In All for One, this is approached this way. If your final difficulty for the spell was 5, and you got 4 successes, you do not succeed. If you got 8 successes, you do succeed, and can enhance it in some way. So, magic in Desolation and All for One are conceived of differently, but mechanically work very similarly. So, when we approach the effect in All for One, we may think of it like this. What am I actually trying to do? Am I affecting a primary characteristic of a person? It's like enhancing strength, as I mentioned earlier. Am I affecting a secondary characteristic of the character? Am I inflicting damage, either non-lethal or lethal? Am I creating an oppositional force that would lead to an opposed roll of some kind? Am I affecting a volume, or am I affecting the size characteristic? Or some combination of these things. And in some types of spells, such as divination, how far across time am I reaching? How long has this spirit I'm trying to summon been deceased? Or how long ago did some past event I'm trying to witness happen. These things add complications. These things raise the difficulty, making it harder for me to cast a spell, requiring more time for this extended role to take place. Magic in All for One is framed in traditions and arts as well. There are three primary spellcasting traditions. These are ceremonial, what we might think of as hermetic almost. They are theurgical, relating to more religious procedure. They are natural, so things along the lines of shamanic tradition, things of being in tune with the world around you, to notice the sympathies between things that enable magic to take place. Magic is conceived of not just as the ability to harness a magical energy. That magical energy is harnessed in order to make contact with the spirits of the natural world, in order to bring these effects to light. Not really a communication or a summoning, binding a spirit to a task, but you could conceive of it that way. After all, in All for One, the major threat isn't something like burn. The major threat is being labeled as a witch or heretic and facing the Inquisition. A pretty major threat. The fourth tradition in All for One is alchemy. And procedurally, it operates very much like magic does, so we won't spend too much time on it. It's very different from how alchemy is approached in Hollow Earth. Alchemy is replicating the spell effects of the different arts via physical work, and it's approached in thinking, what could you actually do through scientific methods by bringing physical components together. So alchemy feels very much like a mystical alchemical tradition. There's a spiritual component of what do these chemicals, these aspects, these things that I'm burning, I'm boiling, I'm mixing, what do they represent to me on a metaphysical level, and what can they actually do when combined? So alchemists might be creating sleeping potions, or billowing clouds of sleeping gas, or, something more explosive. So let's finish off where we began. Alchemy brings us back around to Hollow Earth Expedition. We're not going to talk a lot about alchemy here. We'll look at it again when we do another video on weird science, because they follow similar patterns. But in order to be an alchemist in Hollow Earth Expedition requires having the transmutation talent rather than the magical aptitude talent. And similarly, there are things that you can do, like rituals. These are called enchantments, and they are being applied to physical objects. So you're essentially creating magical items through magical science. The items that you create, like magic in Hollow Earth Expedition, they require an extended skill roll as you slowly build, or as you slowly modify, as you enchant, you steep it in chemicals, or whatever the process is, as you create the artifact, capital A artifact, that you are enchanting. To obtain it for play requires the purchase of that artifact as a resource. Hollow Earth Expedition takes magic items very, very seriously. So, of course, magic items in Hollow Earth Expedition are very, very serious. Alchemists are not to be trifled with. And they might jealously guard, and this further explains why such items would be so jealously guarded. This ends our overview. It's as short as I can make it. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you'll join me for the next installment in the series, which will be looking at two different ways to deal with melee. These are fencing from All for One Regime Diabolique and armed combat, introduced in the very, very new supplement for Hollow Earth Expedition, Revelations of Mars.